Hello and welcome to our program, Where God Weeps, a program where we talk about the situation of the suffering church around the world. Today we're going to be considering a country that is often forgotten in the news, the Central African Republic, a country of some 4 million, which unfortunately has been racked by violence and political instability. But there is hope. Catholics number 21% of the total population, and the bishops there and the church there is working to restore the dignity of the individual. To tell us more about the work of the church, it is my great privilege to welcome His Excellency Bishop Dennis Kofi Agbenyadzi, the Bishop of the Berbérati Diocese in the Central African Republic. Your Excellency, thank you for being with us here today in our program.
Thank you, Mark. I'm privileged to be around here and be with you, to share with you my missionary experience and church faith experience too.
Your Excellency, you joined the Mission Society for Africa at a very young age. Did you always have a desire to be a missionary?
Yes, I did, because we had a missionary priest in our parish back in Ghana, and his commitments to work, commitment to the daily life of people, and he introduced us a bit to it. That's where altar service. So we'll go with him in the villages. So that gave me that intention. I said, no, I can also share my faith with others. That's being a missionary. And I chose the Society of African Missions, SMA Fathers, to be one of them, because the Pope, Paul VI said it, Africans, be your own missionaries.
When did you first have a sense of your own vocation? Was it at that moment when you saw this missionary, or was it sooner? Was it earlier?
It was afterwards. I was 14 years. I attended the first priestly ordination in my diocese, 16 kilometers away. And I was touched by the litany of the saints, the solemnity around that. And I told the parish priest I would like to be a priest. And afterwards to be a missionary too, like him, yeah.
Your first internship was at the same diocese which you are now bishop, the Bishop of Berbérati. Is it, I'm pronouncing it correctly?
Yeah, Berbérati.
Berbérati.
Yeah.
And now you're the bishop. Was it like a homecoming for you to come back as a bishop to the same diocese where you'd served so long ago as an intern?
That is a homecoming.
Yeah.
Because I served among the pygmies. That was 92, 20 years ago, and I came back as a priest 97, and I stayed in the village for 8 good years. That means the group pygmies, they're like the marginalized in society because of the relationship they have with other ethnic groups, who consider them to be less human.
What is it that we understand when we talk about pygmies?
We talk about pygmies in the sense that it's an ethnic group. Yeah, ethnic group, there's no... it's nothing that you call about prejudice. No, nothing.
Right, right.
But then because of history, and that is their relationship, interrelationship with other ethnic groups around who consider them to be their slaves. Wow. So 40 years ago, when we opened the missions there, one of our priests said, how do we make the pygmies? In the idea of the church, just teaching about human dignity,
yes,
that they should also have their own village. There they can have their own fulfillment and satisfaction. That's why we created 3 villages, pygmy villages, with them, so that they can be on their own. And we started activities, farming to have that autonomy, housing to have a good place to stay, because that's hygienic, also education for the children, and health services, at least to move a little bit away from the traditional way of the resistance of the survivor,
Yes.
That's a natural selection.
Yes.
That's to permit children not to die from any kind of diseases. So
yes,
that has been a process that we have been in as part of our evangelization with us, to make them first become humans. And that we retrieve their first their dignity then announce the gospel to them.
It must be extraordinary to see the fruits of your work. Now you have a school, you have, the children, as you say, have a dignity, a sense of their own self-worth.
Yeah.
How do you see that?
It is very marvelous, I would say so, because time of dedication, patience, and getting into contact and entering a culture. That's self-education too, in the sense that you need to accept the fact that you need to go into the culture, learn as a child. There you can announce. It brings our mind back to the incarnation. We say Christ entered our human history in order to lift us up. So in that sense, I see that kind of fulfillment for our missionary work and for the church, because it's part of the mission of the church.
They must have welcomed you back with open arms.
Definitely.
You have many friends.
I do have them, and when I was in the diocese shortly before our meeting here, I could see their enthusiasm. Like, our brother is back, they gave me a name, you're a man of the village, That's a child of the village, that's the name they call me, yeah? Munamboka, that's the language of the pygmies, Munamboka, that's a child of the village.
When you heard the call to become a bishop, what did you do?
I was shocked. I was shocked in the sense that I never thought we could be appointed as missionaries, as bishops now again, in the sense that we encourage the local clergy. And at the same time, I think the church is reminding us of the fact that we are together. There's no stranger in the church. So, and there also we see the divine own work, which comes as a surprise.
What is your Episcopal motto, and why did you choose that particular Episcopal motto?
My Episcopal motto is, yes, Lord, you know. That's John's Gospel, chapter 21, verse 15 and following. That's the experience of Peter after the miraculous catch, Jesus asking Peter, do you love me? And Peter, yes, Lord, you know I love you. But I said, yes, Lord, you know. You know our rising and you know our falling. You continue to entrust to us again a mission that, compared to our human limitations, we may be frightened, but then your grace is sufficient for us. That's why I say, I choose that to say, yes, Lord, you know why you have called me to this ministry.
You have moved from Ghana you've been serving in the Central African Republic for many, many years, and you have lived, of course, the trauma that the country has lived ever since 1960 when France withdrew, and many have described the Central African Republic as a failed state. Can you give us a little bit of a knowledge or understanding of what is the present political situation and what are the challenges faced by the country?
You are right to say that that's the impression they give, and it's not only linked with the Central African Republic. Many African states went through the first period of the collapse of the first regimes because they just copied what was there without getting into contact with the profound aspiration of the people. So this country has gone through this political instability for long, but presently there's a kind of relative peace in greater parts of the country. Elections were held some 2011. Public institutions are there, let's say administrative and political institutions are there, they're working with the possibilities that they have. So I would say we need to build upon that, and that is the work of the church, to encourage peace building and dialogue, bringing all opposition. We always have them, we always have them, but then how do we build peace for the common good?
I think it's important to put a finger on how important the church is, particularly when the government structures are not strong, because the people look to the church. The church is an authority which has an international view. Yeah. How important is the church, not only to the people, but to the political institutions?
The church remains a figure of authority in the sense that the state invites us into certain delicate issues to treat. For instance, mediation between, as I said, political institutions or parties, or even fighting groups. How do we mediate?
The Central African Republic is sadly one of the world's poorest countries. And perhaps you can give us a little bit of an understanding. What do you understand by poverty? Or can you give us a picture of what poverty means in the Central African Republic?
The picture will, just to talk about materially, We have poverty is everywhere in the world.
Exactly.
So materially, that's when you see, you are right to say that the country is endowed with natural resources, but the lack of good governance has plunged the people into this kind of abject poverty. That's the minimum of life: decent housing, decent health services, decent schooling, for enlightenment. So people they want to eat. You find a lot of malnourished people, or people go hungry. Of course, it's linked with other factors.
For example?
We talk about rural exodus. That's the young people leaving the villages to the urban centers, thinking that they could find work. And then sometimes they are jobless. They don't find it. So you can find a concentration in urban centers. So these are some kind of marginal people who you see that sign of stress to get the minimum. But then, despite that, there's a kind of joy. That's what I felt. There's not only material possession that gives joy, but there's something within. Despite the apparent poverty that you can see, you find in that celebration, our gathering, that kind of joy, which brings to the point that, yes, there must be a reality or something giving that inner joy. And I see through the church's activities towards them, that's kind of pastoral work that we do, that solidarity, sharing with them the little that we have, as helping them discover more and more that fulfillment is not just surrounding oneself with gadgets.
Yes. I suppose also the work of the church has been what you've been mentioning, the building of schools and things like that, is precisely to keep the people on the land where they are, to try and prevent this flood to the cities, but say, no, we give education here so that you can grow up and fulfill your life here.
There are different factors, I would say. One, to have them there, to be close to schools, establishment. That's, you can see distant schools. One is the family that suffers, children away from their parents. And sometimes where they will find accommodation is not easy. So having the schools close to certain areas, some kind of concentrated area, villages, you can say, okay, a school will be good there, helps some kind of mobilization of our forces.
Speaking about youth, the problem, of course, is when the youth is dispossessed, when the youth is frustrated, they often turn to crime, to criminality. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a problem in the north of the Central African Republic with bandits, with criminal gangs working. One of them I noted here was called the Zaragina, sort of close to the border with Chad, kidnapping, violence. How has your experience been? Have you encountered this in your work? Mm-hmm. And again, how can the church, if at all, work with trying to limit violence or to try and, in this particular environment?
Yeah, rightly, you say when the youth are dispossessed, in the sense that, some people, because of the instabilities that we have spoken about, once used to the arms, that you have gained your life from the arms, you always continue to use, because if you don't find anything else, you take your gun again and block the road.
Where are the weapons coming from?
Oh, yeah. We all talk about the armed trafficking all over the Sahel the Sahel of Africa, because of conflicting countries there. The church is doing a lot of this contact with them. These isolated groups, they are not established. Isolated groups who operate during the dry season. So you cannot enter into dialogue with them, but then encouraging the villagers, the youth not to be part of that, but to be more vigilant. How do we protect the property and life of people?
There is one group, however, which has been giving nightmares all across Africa. That is Sudan, Uganda, Central African Republic, and that is the Lord's Resistance Army, killing thousands based on demonic possession, drugs, all of the worst that you can think of.
Yes. I would say the Lord's Resistance Army is some kind of a thorn in the flesh of the country now, because a couple of months ago that they have entered the country, that was a couple of months, to be almost a year, to the eastern part of the country.
Yes.
And I think what is traumatizing about it is the abduction of children. Children are worth that you cannot estimate. The abduction of children and to the pain they give to parents. And also the abuses, sex abuses of the youth and the women. You know, people are traumatized. And from our meetings with the bishops in that area, we can see the suffering. And the church is doing much to have kind of homes for these traumatized people, at least to welcome them.
Welcome them back from the...
Yeah, when they're able to escape, some come back, but then they need to go through this kind of...
Because they've been child soldiers, if you will.
They were not child soldiers, but then rather they take them to carry things that they have looted. And sometimes become this kind of sex slaves for them. They carry them and they use them like to protect themselves, a shield, a human shield, against any kind of attack. So if you find this man surrounded with children, what do? You shoot the children too? So it's a kind of human shield that they build around themselves when they abduct these children in numbers. And as I said, the church has some kind of homes, some kind of rehabilitation for those who have lived that experience. And some villages, they put in structures to help treat, you know.
What would be the intent? I don't know, maybe you're not in a position to answer, but is it only looting or is it actually simply to destabilize a country? Because what drives this group?
They create insecurity and they kill. So when they create insecurity, that means they displace this kind of displaced people are moving there and there. People do not stay in their villages. Some villages they attack here, they attack over there. So there's that kind of fear, you know, as we call the nightmare. Would they come to our village? You know, so the whole area is destabilized. The church is still there, but then sometimes you need to move with them. The people who are displaced, you need people attend to them, and the priests attend to them, listen to them, see how best we can reconstruct life with them. Yeah.
I want to move on a little bit to Pope Benedict XVI, who at the ad limina visits of the bishops, he had very strong and important words. I want to make a quote here of what he said to you. "It is the Church's task to defend the weak and to make herself the voice of those who have no voice. Yeah. I would like therefore to encourage the people who work to inspire hope by determined commitment to defending the dignity of the human person and his or her inalienable rights."
Yes.
How do you answer the Pope's call in your life as now a new bishop?
Even before as a bishop, just a couple of months ago, as a missionary, I said I work among the pygmies. And going back to history, they were deprived of certain basic civil rights. So for the first time, they were able to vote in the elections. 2005, they were able to vote.
The first time?
Yes. So that's the first thing, to give them that dignity. These are the people without voice. So as a missionary, and now as a bishop, I'm for all, not only for pygmies, but for other ethnic groups and other parts, that we can promote justice, social justice. Because many times in Africa, elections are occasions of tension and division. How do we make this kind of expression of civil right more human? Something that we take in some kind of conviviality, you know, sharing that we are part of nation building, not to be a question of division. So that is my vision, talking with the people, talking with all parties. How do we focus on the common good? That's all that can help human development.
I want to turn the page a little bit and talk about another challenge that is facing the church, and that is witchcraft. And the challenge of witchcraft that often among the poor, particularly the poor, when there is an illness, when there is some misfortune that occurs, often a person is identified, and that person perhaps identified as a witch and can be killed for this accusation.
This is a very good question. It throws our mind back to analyze the African cosmology. How does the African look at the world, the cosmos? That's beside the supreme being. Then we have we say nature gods. That's the forest, trees, or stones, rivers are
gods.
They are some kind of spirits. And then we come to ancestors, that's human beings. Then afterwards, lesser gods, some have the capacity of capturing natural force and use them either for their good or as nuisance. So here we can situate this belief in witchcraft. That's possessing another power, supernatural power, that you can hurt the life of someone. And life is very sacred. All that touches life, all that destroys life is abhorred by the society. So those who are accused, unfortunately, as you've said it, they're not young, energetic people. These are vulnerable people in the society, children, or elderly ones.
Elderly.
So when you look at these vulnerable groups, of course, there are people who cannot defend themselves. So, as we say, the scientific analysis, lack of, let's say, health centers or medical technologies, and to analyze the causes of death, everything is thrown back. Because when the phenomena is not understood,
yes,
it's referred to
in the tribal or in the original understanding.
So how do we, of course in the church we talk about that Christ is our Lord and Savior. Personal experience with Christ gives another vision. As a pygmy will say, Father, formerly, if I were not to become a Christian, this issue I would have taken it easily. But then now, as a Christian, there's another vision, another orientation. This is what we are working at, a formation or training of our Christians, so they can have personal experience with Christ. Of course, to help them go beyond that ordinary
basic understanding. Do you still find that Christians have a leg in each pond? That is, that declared Christians, but in case of trouble, they'll go back to the traditional religions because it's what they know.
Yeah, Christians sometimes, when we say Christians, we can have nominal Christians or really believing. It's everywhere. It's in the church content, as within herself, saints and sinners. And we are all working towards perfection. And in the sense that we do have some who practice syncretism.
Syncretism?
Yeah, that means
the mixing.
The mixing of both. That's when they are confronted with security, that's their health, confronted with their happiness, sometimes they have not yet made the move. I will give the parable of the sower, The same seed was sown everywhere, but not, in the different instances, not all bear the fruit.
Yes.
Yeah. So in the same way in our lives, in our pastoral work, we announce, but the receptivity, the word, to welcome in faith and to journey with it, that's dying to self and rising to new life in Christ, a new vision, is a task that we continue.
Your Excellency, a bit to your to the needs of your diocese, the situation in which you find yourself now. What would you say are the greatest needs that you confront in your diocese?
The needs, first of all, we say the church, we need saintly people. That's, we need to be focused on Christ. How do we live the gospel? Make it a new life for us, new creation. Yes. Besides that, we have the structural needs that we need to, as a new person, I'm going to make some kind of inventory, and I know definitely areas where we need to put structures. As I said, evangelization, primary evangelization among the pygmies, we need some areas where they can have churches. Other areas of the diocese where the churches are now smaller because the Christians, the number has grown.
Yes.
You can talk about population increase. So we need to see to those things. So there'll be schools also to help the education of the youth, as I said. And pastoral center, I'm thinking about the pastoral center that people can come in for some kind of training on certain pertinent social issues. It can also help for counseling. Because counseling of the young who would like to enter into marriage, because we like to focus now on the family.
Okay.
The family that stable, and that's social institution which has its origin in God,
yes,
which helps oneself, the individual, and to build up solidarity. We can have that center for counseling. So having a pastoral center with all certain facilities like this can also help, because around us we don't have such things. Of course, health issues will also come in. You need
clinics.
Clinics, yeah.
Well, basically, you need everything.
Not everything, but then there are some. We establish some kind of priority, hierarchy of priorities.
Yes.
in the sense that health is something that you cannot.
So we're
you
talking
cannot
about chapels, churches, schools, pastoral centers, clinics.
clinics. That's to help, because you have hospitals very distant from certain villages, and the road network are not so good.
Your Excellency, thank you for having been with us today in our program.
Thank you to Mark, and thank the team. And we keep praying for a better world.
Amen to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having been with us today on our program, Where God Weeps. And if you'd like to know more about the situation of Catholics in the country of Central African Republic, in the Diocese of Berbérati, I would encourage you to look at the contact information at the end of this program. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.